The final filter that we're going to take a look at is the chorus filter. Now, I want to throw out once more that all of these filters, all these audio filters, are pro-only features, and that you can add them directly to an audio source, or that you can add them to an audio listener if you just want to apply the effect to all incoming audio. Now, let's go ahead and get this applied first. So, with my little radio selected that already has my audio source on it, we'll just go to Component, Audio, and choose the chorus filter. Now, a heads up. The chorus filter will allow you to create some pretty scary effects if you play with it. Like if you're just really trying to get under somebody's skin, you can do it right here if you really want to. But the purpose of the chorus filter is to take an incoming sound and to offset it, or basically offset duplicates of that incoming sound, so it sounds like it's coming from multiple sources with variations in the overall pitch with each different copy. So let's take a quick look at the properties. Actually, before I even worry about the properties, let's just go ahead and hit play. And I'll get us kind of lined up with our boombox. Actually, matter of fact, let me just do it this way. I'll stop playing, and then let's just hit Control P, and I'll walk over to the radio, and then click in the inspector. And you can already kind of hear the effect. If I turn it on and off, it'll become readily apparent. So here it is with it on. And now off. So you can hear each individual key. And then if I turn it back on, so that's pretty easy to see. Now let's talk a little bit about these properties. So we have dry mix and then wet mixes 1, 2, and 3. This means that you have a total of 4 different copies of the original sound, including the original. The dry mix is literally just your original sound, and that allows you to control how much of that original sound you're using on a 0 to 1 basis, with 0 being I don't even want to hear the original, I just want to hear the chorus copies, or 1 being I want to hear it at full volume. Then wet mixes 1, 2, 3 are each one of your offset copies of the sound. So the first one, the second one, the third one, and these are all offset 90 degrees from each other by a sine wave, which is controlling their pitch. Now, what do I mean when I say that? Well, let me jump over to my Photoshop file where I've got some image from a previous video that we're not really interested in at the moment. The way this works is that you have a sine wave. Let me just draw. This is a representation of a sine wave. It's not a perfect sine wave by any means. And what this sine wave is controlling is the pitch of each one of your wet mixes. Mixes with an E. Okay, I have to erase that, sorry. Drive myself crazy if I leave that there. So there are going to be 2 properties that we can control with this. We can control the wavelength, and we can control the depth, which we'll take a look at here in just a moment. But you're not really going to notice it until we start really changing the frequency so that you can hear how quickly we can shuffle up and down. Now let's go back over to Unity. Let's take a look at what we've got here. So if we don't worry about the mixes, let's just say they're all mixed appropriately. As a matter of fact, let's set them all to 0.5 so that they're all equal. And let's just take a look at delay. Now what delay is going to do is control how much of a delay in milliseconds we get from the dry mix to the preceding wet mixes. And this goes from 0 all the way up to 100. So if I set this to 100 and hit play, you can really hear that delay. Now let's pull that back down to something a little more reasonable, like the default value of about 40. And I'll pull down my volume a little bit, at least while I'm talking. Next we have the rate. This is the wavelength of that change in pitch. This allows you for variation between each one of your wet mixes, as your first wet mix 1, is its sine wave of pitch is offset by 90 degrees from the original. Then wet mix 2 is offset by 90 from that, wet mix 3 by 90 from that. So you're getting 3 different pitches with each one of those copies of the sound. If I take the rate and I start to shorten it, get a load of what happens. This is actually really cool, and it can get scary very quickly. Oh, not delay. Grab the wrong one, sorry. So let's set this maybe to like 0.1. Now, as I start to increase the rate, we're actually tightening up that curve. And you're getting a waver effect in there. Now, I'm going to kick up the sound on all my mixes. So let's go with maybe 0.8 down the board. And what this is literally doing is taking this wave and it's just tightening it up. Like so. Now back over here in Unity. So pretty scary, right? Now if we take the depth, we can control how much up and down there is to those sine waves. And you can see this is set to 0.03, so we're not getting a lot of variation by default. And I'm actually going to make Frederick be quiet for just a moment. So, because that's actually so freaky, it's starting to distract me. So if we increase the rate, we're starting to really get a lot of, it's almost like vibrato effect, because our changes in pitch are wildly shooting up and down. Or at least they're shooting up and down very quickly. But right now our depth is very low, so we're not getting a drastic change. We can take this depth and set it between 0 and 1, and I'll warn you, at 1 it just starts to get really out of control. So let's jump back in, and I'll get us right up against the boombox. Now I'm going to take the rate and we'll kick that up so we can really hear that vibration. Now, if I increase the depth, say to 0.1, so yeah, pretty scary, right? Or at least I think it is. So actually, what I want to put 0.6. Definitely some horror effects if you wanted to play with that. Now, the last property we have access to is feedback. And just as the name suggests, if you're familiar with any audio, if you've ever played with a microphone and a monitor, you have probably created feedback just for the fun of it. You know, like just some Jimi Hendrix and just play with the feedback. But this allows you to take the overall effect and feed it back through to become the dry mix on the next cycle. It's nice for adding a little bit of extra oomph to the chorus, but you just like with real feedback, you have to be really careful because it'll just blow out your speakers at some point, and it'll get just wildly out of control. So I'm going to really softly try to bring this up, and it's going to make my sound get really crazy really quickly. Almost has kind of an echoey effect to it. And so yeah, it's actually starting to tear up my audio. And since I don't want to risk anything because I'm doing a recording, we'll go ahead and just stop right there because we can do all kinds of crazy things with that. You just have to be careful because if you set your feedback all the way up, you can start really tearing up your whole sound system. So that is a look at the audio chorus filter. You can use it for very simple effects like just making it sound like you have more sources for a particular sound with some variations between each one. Really, it boils down to controlling your delay, which is how much of a delay there is between the original and these offset chorus copies. Your rate, that's going to depend really on how quickly you want that variation to change. If you don't want a waver effect, you're going to leave that pretty much right where it is. And then your depth is going to control how much variation you have. So you have to kind of watch out for that one. You'll notice it's set very, very low by default. And even a value of 0.1 will cause a lot of variation. So that will wrap things up for this video and for this section over Unity's audio system. So thank you very much for watching.